to join us today? See, Chris is on the phone.
Hi, Mayor. Sorry about that.
We have everybody.
No, we're still waiting for Chief Clifford. I can go through and tell you who's on the call right now, though. Lieutenant McLaughlin, Mike Gerasi, Carl Williams, Councilwoman Porterfield, Jamel Mohammed, Jennifer Orsini, Councilmember Palomeni, Council President Budavaran, Kevin Spahn, Lieutenant Antonovich, Reverend Hamilton, Dr. Warden, Ryan Mastrone, and then Steve Signor.
So the Chief's just finishing up a call to...
I think they are. I'm going to shoot him a text.
Well, it's 2 o'clock, so I want to get started. The Chief can join us. I want to thank everyone for taking the time again to participate in this process. We're actually putting together quite a comprehensive package, and everybody should be giving themselves a pat on the back for the time and effort they're putting in this.
Has joined the meeting.
For the agenda, I'm going to open up for Jamel Mohammed, who's going to talk about violence prevention and reduction. Jamel, are you there? And again, I want to thank you for the work you do every day, and thank you for being here today.
Said something must be uploaded today.
Negative.
Your audio is broken up and
Off and on.
miss.
I thought Chris were having problems.
It's still hit and miss.
Yeah, Jamel, just call in from your phone if you can, and then if everybody could just go on mute, that might help.
Carissa, can you hear us in the conference room?
Yes, Chief, you're coming through clear.
Yeah, whoever's calling user 5, can you please go?
Yeah. It sounds like everyone's on it.
And Jamel, sometimes just signing off and signing back in will clear up those connection issues.
Carissa, can you hear us in the conference room?
I can.
Mayor?
Off again.
And Jamel, when you sign back in, kill your video. That might help too.
Okay.
Carissa, Mayor, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear us?
Yes, sir, staff. My computer. People very much.
Can you guys hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can. We are having technical difficulties in the police department also. Is Jamel back on yet? Oh yeah, I can see. I can see.
I don't think he ever signed off, so there still seem to be
Yeah.
issues with
I'm
the
still
audio.
trying to figure this out.
Jamel, as you still figure out technically, do we want to move on to just use of force policies with Chief Sieber? Just in
Yeah,
the interest
that's
of
what I
time.
thought. Maybe while Jamel's resolving that, to have Chief Sieber and Sergeant Barberwich talk about use of force.
We are, the problem is that we're having our own bandwidth problems here at the police department. We're trying to figure that out too. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah, you're coming in
Yes.
loud and clear, Chief.
Okay, I'll just have Chief Sieber come and use my laptop here. Our connection through the main computer is not working. There you go.
All right, good afternoon. We'll try this. Hopefully everyone can hear us. We good to go?
They're down there.
Okay. I asked Chris yesterday to send out our use of force policy along with the state recommend the model policy that DCGS puts out, as well as some of our accreditation information. I'm not going to get into the use of force policy line by line, but basically kind of summarize how do we develop them. Explain that all of our policies are living documents. When I say living documents, I mean they can be changed. We have a system in place now that changes are very easily done for updates, whether it's legal reasons, procedural reasons, or anything on those lines. The state has put out a modified in September 2020. They put out a new model policy for guidance for municipalities such as ourselves to follow. Obviously, you have some government executive orders that come into play. The accreditation standards that we must meet to be accredited agency. The ones I sent you, unfortunately, when I copied them, I copied the old policy because I took them out of file. The file wasn't updated, paper file. So I'll resend those out. But what happens is with accreditation, we have to meet certain criteria within our policies, and it gets highlighted within the accreditation file. I can if need be. But what I'm really getting at, there's a lot of components that go into our policy development and the way we write our policies. It's not just kind of thrown together from how procedural how we do things. Obviously, the laws affect them. The criminal procedural laws that court cases that have resolved certain things of how we can do it. All those things are taken into account. With this update, we just updated our policy. I believe it's December 15th or 18th. It is actually being posted on our website as we speak. I thought it already was. Unfortunately, I had a bout with COVID, so I was out for a few weeks. so I got a little delay. Okay. Sorry about the echo. With that, I'm sure who had time to read the policies or not. Again, all of our policies are posted on our website. But we did make some major changes in that December issue. Our definitions we expanded, so the definitions kind of follow the model policies. Anything for, let's try and get this right. Placement officer's knee and body weight on the head of individual attempted to control the individual is prohibited. Certain things within the policy, force shall not be used by an officer in accordance with executive order, executive law 840, and that's outlaid in the policy. Again, I don't want to go paragraph by paragraph when we can if we need to, but even paying compliance techniques and so forth, we made a bunch of changes within the policy. The bottom line is we can still make additional changes, recommendations by this committee right here. And we do make changes throughout the year on a variety of policies. Usually they're based on if we change up some of our training techniques, or if there's a law that gets changed, executive order that comes out, or a criminal procedural law that's something the court has found to be a civil violation or anything along those lines. So kind of open up for questions. I think questions might be easier for me to answer than kind of just sit here and go step at you.
So Chief Sieber, thanks for the update, and I'll check to see what some of the details were. But what you mentioned just now about like changing the way that police officers use their bodies, their body weight. When you have a change in the policy, and I forgot how often during the year you said it gets updated. I know the recent one you just said was December 15th. Is there a modification to officers' training that goes along with that? With
Yes.
changes?
Yes, there's some roll call training. The officers receive this electronically, so obviously they have their own document. Then we address it through roll call training, meaning when the officer reports their work over a series of so many days, we touch on the modifications within the policy. And then our training unit adapts to within the policy. Now that training might not be given out. It wasn't given out on December 15th, but will be part of our in-service this spring to adjust the modifications made within the policy.
Okay, so you could theoretically have a gap. So by the time an officer actually gets to practice whatever the new update to the policy is, there could be a gap of some number of months between when, I mean, I know you talk about it in roll call. I know they know what it is, but in terms of actually going through where there's a physical activity associated with the policy change.
Every time we issue a policy, electronically goes out to the officer. That officer is responsible for acknowledging that policy within so many days electronically. When they acknowledge that policy, they acknowledge it with the understanding they understand the changes that made within the policy. Also, there is and what happens also whole system with our policy system, it shows any changes that were made between one policy and another, so they can easily see those changes. So there's, even though I understand where you're headed with this. If okay, we're preaching it, but we're not living it, which is not correct. Every officer now knows that they cannot use the knee to the head and neck area and so forth. So you're correct making that assumption that has to be taught and changed. You're changing. You act the way you're trained. But we, especially a policy as important as this, it gets a lot of attention. It gets a lot of conversation, and trust me, everybody in the department knows it's not applicable to use on the field.
Okay, thanks. You got it. Thank you for answering the question.
Any other questions? Again, I want to give you as much information as possible, but it's just again, when I say living document, and some policies are not changed for years and years. We review them every year for changes, but we have 172 policies, and obviously we don't change everyone every year. But the reason I use the term living document, because I want everyone to be aware that we adjust as things change in our environment, our communities, and our laws, and so forth. So the system we have in place is very easy to manage the system and get that knowledge out to the individual officers, so they have it for their job performance and out in the streets. So.
Thanks, Chief Sieber. And just to reiterate, I sent out those all those policy documents and accreditation documents just a little while ago, so everyone should have them in their inbox as of right now.
Okay. And just as a caveat, Chris, I sent the old policy under the accreditation format, so I apologize for that. So we can resend the accreditation portion out of it. On the accreditation portion, I just want everybody to be aware it does play a role in policy development, because there are standards that we have to meet within the New York State accreditation. That's all.
Which body in New York State reviews it to approve the accreditation? Is it the state police, or is it something else, or which organization?
No,
in New York State?
New York State Divisional DCJS, Divisional Criminal Justice Services. They are kind of like the law enforcement's parent, if you would. That's why I refer to them as. They set the guidelines for us and the standards. There's a lot of the way we train certain things. They have certain criteria that we have to meet, for the division. So they are really, I consider them our oversight board to make sure that we, and I say ours, meaning all law enforcement, that we have to adhere to for, legality reasons.
Okay. Just one last thing, like in 2020, how many times did the policy change?
The use of force policy?
Yeah.
Twice, I believe.
twice in 2020.
Yep. I believe one time in springtime. It might have been in the fall of 2019, but I could get that answer for you.
No,
But
that's fine.
twice, yeah.
Twice, good enough.
Yeah.
Thanks. I mean, so it's not something that happens 10 times a year. It probably happens once or twice a year.
No, most policies don't get changed, quite frankly.
Right.
In a year. They get reviewed every year, by command staff and on an ongoing basis. But no, most of them don't change. Again, we have 172 policies, and I just let me explain further. We went to the Lexipol system. If you get a chance to look up Lexipol, you can it'll give you better information about it. A few years ago, we've been writing policies and heading towards accreditation for many years. And one of the big stumbling blocks is for accreditation is you have to have all your policies meet the standards, New York State Accreditation Standards. With that said, we were going very good. We're getting our full steam ahead, but we bought into the Lexipol system about 2.5, 3 years ago. And what happens is it gives us further guidance, as well as DCGS and their model policies, for further guidance that is written for each state, depending on their laws and so forth. So we took over the system, and what happens is it not only assists us on developing these policies, but it really helps us to disseminate these policies. The officers get training. We also, just to put it out there, we have daily training bulletins we issue every month. We do between 10 and 20 of them a month. They're issued the first or second day of the month. Every officer has to read them and acknowledge them. And there's actually a question or two at the end. And they're just realistic type of scenarios that they give, and you have to answer some questions, and it gives you the policy in there, the applicable part of the policy. And they're very good. But we incorporate that keeps the officers fresh. So when they're in the streets, that they understand what the policies are, because sometimes you don't deal with the policy for months at a time, or some of the rare policies. And so it just keeps them fresh. But that's another mechanism of training that we have within the department that the Lexipol system provides. I'm getting at here is there's many components. We don't just write a policy and put it on the shelf. It's kind of actively, living document, as they always say.
So thank you, Chief. Wonder if we could go back to Jamel if his audio issues have been resolved.
It's a little scratchy here.
You're still not coming through very well. Are you still using your computer?
When we drop his video, it might help with his bandwidth.
Yeah, Jamel, if you drop your video, you might want to try that, and keep your audio, obviously. You have to take yourself off mute.
No, I just called in, so
Jamel, you're showing as being muted at your end. If we control that.
okay, can you hear me better?
There's feedback.
Yeah, I think, Jamel, maybe you need to mute your computer if you're on the.
No, I just closed out on the computer.
Okay, good. Yeah, that'll do it. You should be good.
So am I sounding a little better? Am I clear
Yes.
now?
Yeah,
Much
100% better.
All right. So I'll try to make it a little more concise since we lost time with the technical issues. Thank you, Mayor, and everyone else on the panel for giving me a chance to present our program. What we do, just a quick history of it. We've been in partnership with the Sheriff's Office and the Police Department, as well as the District Attorney's Office since 2014. With this, the program that we bring is not something unique and greatly new. When New York State was given the funds under the New York State Senate back in 2009 to bring the Chicago ceasefire program into New York State, which, over in Albany is now known as SNUG. It went through a few transformations of names, but I was part of the team that initially set that program up, and I was responsible for the street team, which was the street outreach supervisor. So we took that program, and what I did at the request of the sheriff and at the time chief chairs, and we modified the program to fit Schenectady's landscape. We took out the things that I knew from experience that was not necessarily working in the best interest of the relationship we wanted to have with the program in the community. We took the things that worked good and left the things that I saw was not working just as well. So this is more or less a kind of a morph of that particular model. And I, can say that to me, I think is probably biased, but it's been working very effectively. The program structure, at a full scale, we would have 3 outreach workers and 3 violence interrupters. Right now at the scale, because of the funding, we work with 3 outreach workers who have been trained to kind of like do both positions or both roles, which is an outreach worker as well as a violence interrupter. And our objective is not to be the crime solvers of the shootings that happen in the city. Our objective and our role is to prevent the next injury from happening, and to the extent we can, prevent the first injury from happening. Just on some of the numbers, we have 3 outreach workers, like I said, and the program is data-driven. It is based on information that we get in collaboration from the police department as far as hotspots are concerned. They help us identify patterns of movement of some of the crimes that, shootings that's taking place, and work the hours that these things are most likely to happen. So our staff work Tuesday through Saturday. Tuesdays were 9 to 5, Wednesdays were 10 to 6, Thursdays were 12 noon to 8 p.m. Friday we're working from 6 p.m. to 2 in the morning, and then Saturdays we're working from 8 o'clock p.m. to 4 in the morning. And sometimes we shifted over the last probably year and a half, minus the COVID issues, because there's been a lot of the after-hour parties. So we shifted the hours over to cover, at least till 6 in the morning, 7 in the morning, when those parties are over. Last year, we did approximately 64 conflict mediations. Prior to going into the pandemic, with the shutdown, slowdown, we were averaging at least 140 to 155 conflicts mediated per year. Now, when we talk about conflict mediation, we're not just talking about the number of shootings or shots fired that's there. A lot of these incidents are things that the staff around in the community, when things are happening, they see things escalating, they know the players, and the potential for things to escalate into maybe gunfire or gun injury. So these are incidents that they have intervened in either on the spot or that they are made aware of. Each outreach worker has a responsibility to carry between 9 and 12 of a caseload. And that caseload is not given over by probation, parole, the courts, or anything in that nature. Those are individuals that they identify from their canvassing in the community and their knowledge of the streets. But we look for those who are at the highest risk of either shooting or getting shot. And these are the individuals that the staff are expected to manage and work with to reconnect them with services, employment, trainings, whatever it is, to pretty much reduce their likelihood of injury or being want to injure someone else. One of the biggest pieces that I kind of give a wrap, there's a lot that goes with the program, but like Chief Seaver said, it's probably better to answer questions than to try to give a full overview. But one of the biggest relationship pieces that came in, supported the program, was the sheriff using his, I'm going to say, wisdom to also enter a professional service agreement with the organization, Youth Life Support Network, to bring us in to oversee inmate services inside the jail. And what that has done is also given us credibility with a lot of the individuals that come and circulate through the jail, whether they're, with gun violence or not, because those are the same individuals who go back out and give credibility in the streets to the name of the program, as well as the staff who's working the program. So this also has been a benefit because as some of the individuals come in with gun charges, the time that they're sitting there gives me a chance to meet them without kind of coming across as if I'm trying to solve a crime or, create a case on them or whatever the case may be. So that has been one of the biggest benefits and lifts that we have added to the program, is the sheriff giving us the responsibility of managing the inmate services coordinator inside the jail. So with that, I'll pause and, throw it out for any questions and clarity.
Jamel, thanks. This is Jenkins again. So I don't mean to be the only one asking questions today, but how do you measure success on the program?
How do we measure success on the program? We have probably the most difficult job of anybody at the table, because we have to prove something that didn't happen. In other words, how do we know that we contributed to the reduction of gun violence or shooting injuries or whatever the case may be, because it didn't happen? And our way of doing that is who we case manage and the people that we're involved in, the partnerships that we definitely are grateful for, which is the police department, the sheriff's office, as well as the district attorney's office. But when we sit and we look at the individuals who we have in our case management as high risk, and we're connecting them and getting them connected back to services, and what we do is a full wraparound, different from the Chicago model as well as the Albany program. And when I say full wraparound service, I mean, we don't just take the individual that we're working with that's at high risk. We look at their family. We engage the family to see what's happening at home, inside the household, the things that have him or her unstable and in the streets, thinking that's the only means of survival, so to say. And we work with them as well, connecting with social services, housing, training, whether it's the significant other, the wife, whoever it is. So our measure of success is when we can look and see the individuals that we know are at the highest risk, one, re-engaged and connected with services. And two, when we know that we have a rapport relationship with individuals that are gun carriers or, involved with the gun violence, that we can at least have a conversation with them, that they're more susceptible to reaching out and calling us when they're in a heated conflict versus going home or in their car and picking up a gun. So yeah, we do have the hardest task of proving our success. But, again, when we look back and see who we're managing and the relationships that we have with those in the community and the services we connect them with, that's our best way of measuring the success of the program.
Okay. So actually that's a more, it's a good, and it's also a more far-reaching measurement definition of success, right? Because you're actually hopefully trying to generate a better outcome for the individuals who are involved, right?
Correct.
And so I'm guessing that that's going to give you good insight into where there's probably a lot of gaps in connecting in what the other services provide.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So is that something you want to comment on, or?
I mean, it does let us know where things are falling through. And again, the blessing of having the inmate services role helps out, because some of these individuals may come through the jail with very minor offenses that, if they're not given the resources and tools that they need, can easily become tomorrow's, gun carrier or someone that's involved with something that's gun related. So yes, by all means, I've been able to identify, and we have great partnership. I mean, there was a connection made with social services on a higher administrative level. So therefore, we are able to not necessarily just tell someone where to go, but we can also call in on the administrative level to say, we have this individual and we need this file to be, looked at closer and quicker, because we don't have the same amount of time as someone that's just going through the process. And we've had that cooperation and support. So yes, we can definitely easily identify where the gaps are at. SPAC has been, a good partner to us, as well as some of the other agencies in the Schenectady landscape. We can do better by it, and we can definitely use more support in getting, some of these gaps filled. But yes, we definitely can see where those services and those gaps come in place at.
Thank you. And Jamel, would you be available for questions afterwards, or people could call you in the next couple days if they have any additional inquiries?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I guess just one quick thing I wanted to ask you before he goes. What more needs to be done from your perspective?
I think we're in the right direction, especially from this collaboration, this community collaboration as far as law enforcement. Some of the things that, that I guess fall short is the relationship, and we're dealing with a reality of a sense of safety. A lot of people don't feel safe, and everyone would say, they need jobs. Everybody wants jobs, and that's not the 100% total of the picture, because we give people jobs all the time. But if they don't have the tools that are necessary, they don't have the training, if they don't have the other things, the other needs met, then those jobs only last a few weeks or a month at best. So it's not just about jobs, it's a matter of making them, as whole as possible. And that, I think, is a bigger question and a bigger conversation, as the mayor's saying, that maybe, more time can be put to it to have a conversation around that, because it is an important one. And if we're not speaking to it and we're not addressing it, the gang issue is a problem, but it's not the problem. A lot of things that we've dealt with, a lot of the shootings that we've dealt with were either interpersonal conflicts or individuals that are doing home invasions or other things because they see other people or are aware of other people who have money from their illicit activities, and they decide they're going to go after them instead of standing on the corner where there's not as much money anymore. So it is a conversation that I think and hope that we can have a fuller conversation on, because it's not as difficult to solve as is made to see.
If I could have a minute here just to kind of piggyback what I was saying. I started working closely with Jamel probably about 6 years ago. It was really when Chief Kilcullen left, and I stepped in when I was a lieutenant to fill the void there. And I quickly came to learn that when we talk a lot about the community being a part of public safety, his organization, the Youth Life Support Network, is a community-focused non-for-profit with a focus on public safety. He's doing exactly what we ask, is that the community become involved in providing public safety. He's doing it independent of the police department, but with the support of the police department and the sheriff's department. And he's, over the last 6 years that I've known him, he's become one of the people that I reach out to for advice and counsel on many different topics. And it's very important to myself and the sheriff, and then many of my command staff to be able to reach out to him to find out what he is seeing. Now, we don't share case information, and it goes both ways that we don't share. We share information one way to him. We don't get it back from him, and there's a purpose for that. They're out there providing a service to the community, and they have the trust of the community, and it's a very important service that they're providing. How do I measure success? Before we had the pandemic, which kind of halted everybody being out there talking and interacting with everybody, we had probably a 4-year decline in gun-involved violence. And the gun-involved violence elimination program initiated by the state is a collaborative of different strategies, and his strategy of them. So he's a part of the solution that we saw a 4-year decline in gun violence. And we're very happy to have him a part of our team here, both at the city level and the county level. So I hope that, that little bit of extra information helps everybody better understand what he does.
If Lieutenant Antonovich could go over procedural justice.
Can everybody hear me all right?
Yes.
Procedural justice is a program that we began our involvement with in 2017. Myself, Lieutenant Kelly, were trained as instructors, and after that, we have actually been certified as master instructors. This should be the topic of the day because I'm actually in Binghamton at the moment, instructing a trainer procedural justice class for the Department of Justice Services. The program was developed by Tom and Tracy in conjunction law in conjunction with the Chicago Police Department and was brought over here a few years ago. It really focuses on the four main principles of procedural justice, which are voice, neutrality, respect, and trust. When we talk about voice, we're talking about, when we interact with the public, we're giving those citizens a voice, letting them know that, regardless of the decisions that we have to make, they understand that they've at least got to have a voice in the matter or feel like their concerns have been heard. Neutrality, which would mean that we're making our decisions and taking our actions based on facts and evidence, keeping bias out of it, and not going into calls with preconceived notions. Respect is obviously very easy. It's just, continuing to treat people with respect and acting in a respectful manner, hoping in turn that we would receive that, back from the public. And trust. So the whole purpose of this is to develop, foster trust within the community, or trust that we might already have, with the ultimate goal of gaining legitimacy for the department and law enforcement as a whole. We've been giving this training. We've done it throughout the department, and now we have had the curriculum was approved by the municipal or MPTC. I'm not quite sure what off the top of my head. It's the Municipal Police Training Center. They've approved the curriculum, and it's considered a mandatory part of the police academy. So all new recruits are getting this training.
Paul, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you're cutting in and out.
Maybe try cutting off the video thing too.
Is this any better?
It's yeah, I could
Yes.
understand what you were saying, but it was in and out. There was some interference there.
Mayor, is there a point where I cut out that you need me to pick back up from?
I could hear what you were saying or understand what you were saying, even though it was broken up. Genghis, could you hear it or not?
I could have heard, so I don't feel I need anything filled in.
Very good.
Anybody else? Could have them repeat it, or we can prepare a summary of this to be sent out to everybody so that people understand the kind of the history of it and also what we're doing to implement it within the department and some of the role that Schenectady plays in training other agencies across the state.
So is it time, Paul, is it okay to ask questions now, or did you have more you wanted to present?
Certainly, I think probably answering questions on it would probably be more helpful for everyone.
So there is a standard metric you can use, right? Is 100% of officers being trained, or what percentage is being trained? Is Schenectady at 100%?
Yes, currently we're at 100%, and it should stay there now that this is a mandatory part of the Zone 5 Academy curriculum.
Okay. And is there, so assuming that, new recruits get trained at the academy, is there something like a refresher training periodically?
Absolutely. So everybody receives Procedural Justice 1, which is the first part of the principled policing package. Procedural Justice 2 is designed to be given between 6 months to a year, but it could be anytime after. And that's kind of reinstilling the values that we initially introduced everyone to with Procedural Justice 1. It incorporates role-playing scenarios and some more different, basically reaffirming a lot of the things that we talked about in Procedural Justice 1, but in another way. So it's an ongoing, I guess, culture shift attempt.
Okay. And just one quick thing, does the sheriff's department also participate, or is it just the police?
At the moment, we have only trained the police department. I know that when we are training new instructors, we did have, I believe Mike Gerasi is on the call. He is now an instructor as well. So I'd have to speak to him to understand whether they'd been implementing that within the sheriff's office yet or not. But I know that they do have personnel who are trained to provide training.
So this question is going to be a little left field. In your training experience, what has been one or two types of pushback you get for any of these, the voice, neutrality, respect, trust, and do you get any pushback from inmates? Do they raise any concerns about, well, that's just not going to work kind of statements? Does anything come to mind at the top of your mind?
Yeah, that's a good question. So basically with any training that you're providing, there's no magic pill or perfect training that can encompass every single scenario that you can imagine with this one, magic wand. So obviously there are going to be times where you're doing your best to practice these 4 principles, but it's just not working for that particular call. However, the basis and the way that the principles are laid out, that it's such common sense that there's really no pushback. You can't argue with, treating people with respect. You can't argue with giving people a voice. You can't argue with being transparent in your actions and trying to gain trust within the, the citizenry, and, making your decisions neutrally. It's part of what we're supposed to do in law enforcement. So there are different modules within the training where we talk about, officer wellness, mentally and emotionally. We talk about history, so some historical events that kind of led us to where we are today, and things that might have contributed to, the hindering the legitimacy of police across the nation. So, we get into some heated discussions about, well, this happened back in the times of slavery. Why is that my problem? How do I have anything to do with this? And we kind of explain how it's not necessarily your fault, but it is your problem. And it's something that we need to work together on to move forward and try to find the right solution to gain that legitimacy or increase it within the community. Because, stories are told from family to family, from generation to generation. So a lot of these issues are very personal to people that might not have even been alive for them. Same thing is, a new police officer gets hired tomorrow. Maybe they weren't personally responsible for some of the things that happened, in the law enforcement community, but these are problems that they've inherited, and we need to all work together to fix.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Carl Williams. So good afternoon, Mayor, Chief Clifford, and everyone else in attendance tonight. Hey, Lieutenant Antonovich. My question was pretty much how often is your material reevaluated, just based on current trends or issues that are happening in our society? To also include, do you incorporate community members' feedback and then also students or police officers' feedback into uh, future classes?
Hey, Carl. Great question. So the curriculum is actually very similar to the way that Chief Sieber was explaining our policies being a living document. Almost every time we give this training, we've updated things and changed things, and not a major change from those four main principles, but we find examples that are more current, things that might be, you might come across a news story or a video that falls in line with what we're trying to implement here, and we try to keep it as up to date as possible every single time we provide the training. I had something else I wanted to say, but I lost my train of thought. As far as what was the second part of your question, Carl? Because
It was incorporating community members or feedback from students and police officers that have taken the class.
yes, so we have course evaluation forms. So every time we offer this training, we ask for honest feedback from every officer who's gone through it, and we take a lot of those the feedback forms that are filled out into consideration when we're putting the curriculum together for the future classes. And recently, we've been working with myself and Lieutenant Kelly have been working with DCJS on trust building conversations with members of SNUG that Jamel referenced earlier. And we've had some classes where I taught one in Amherst a couple of months ago where we had two members of SNUG that were there for the training, and they took notes, and we had long discussions based on their input and what they thought of the curriculum. So we are doing our best to incorporate community members, feedback from officers, as much as we can to possibly make this curriculum as effective as possible.
Thank you.
Just to keep us on the timeline, wanted to move on to the next topic. But again, any of these, if people have additional questions or looking for more robust information, don't hesitate to reach out to Carissa, the chief's office, or myself. We'll make sure we get the information to you. Is Lieutenant Kelly there to go over the implicit bias awareness training?
Yes, I'm right here, Mayor.
Thank you, Lieutenant.
You're welcome. Tom Kelly, I'm a lieutenant with Schenectady PD. I want to talk a little bit about the implicit bias training that we do, and this builds off of Procedural Justice 1 and 2, and we actually call this PJ3. The reason we do this training is really because of awareness of factors that go into human decision making, and we want to learn, and we want to talk to officers about how they can make better choices when they're conscious of the bias or stereotypes that exist in the world. With the biases, we're aware that there's implicit associations that relate to social groups such as race or gender, and everybody has these associations. And when these associations are relatively positive or negative towards a different group, they constitute bias. So when we talk about implicit bias, this is different than explicit. If somebody's explicitly biased, they voice those opinions. But implicit, it's something it's activated involuntary. It's beyond awareness or control. And implicit bias is concerned with those unconscious or cognition that influences our understanding or our actions and our decisions that we make. We kind of break these situations down into different types of traps or situations that trigger a mental reaction which influence behavior. We talk about like a fast trap, which would be a shortcut, or where you over rely on the implicit bias in the decisions. And that happens in stressful situations and rapid encounters when an officer or where somebody has to make a quick decision. And we also talk about slow traps, where the situations that somebody may find themselves in or at risk of being perceived negatively, that could be somebody who has a tattoo, could be at risk of being in a slow trap, and that somebody may judge them for that tattoo that they have or the type of clothing that they wear. We talk about stereotypes and the ideas or associations that connect a group and traits about that group. We define prejudice and the belief that a stereotype is true, and then also one step further in discrimination, where behavior is in line with a stereotype or belief. And we generate a lot of discussions, and there's a lot of the reason this is Procedural Justice 3 is because we get a little bit more into the academic side of things after an officer's been introduced to procedural justice and had those conversations. This training that we do is also for DCJS. We train instructors around the state. We have partnerships with DCJS, with Yale University, with Chicago Police Department, with the Center for Police Equity, and Dr. Philip Goff down in New York City. So this is something that's been built on, and to answer Carl Williams' previous question, it's a constantly refined in what's happening in current events and how to structure and how to present it. And we present this to trainers, to police officers, and civilian groups as well. I know I covered a lot of things really quick, but certainly I'll take any questions that anyone may
Thanks,
have.
Lieutenant Kelly. In a similar manner to the procedural justice one, how long is the training, and actually is there 100% training rate for SPD?
Yes, everyone in SPD has had implicit bias. It's an 8-hour day.
Okay. And now, who on specifically this one, implicit bias, is it strictly just like yourself and other officers or other trainers, or do you get people from the outside to come in? A little bit to Carl's question, do you hear, from example, a person in the community, maybe a member of clergy, maybe an academician, somebody like Dr. Ward, do you have like a guest come in there, or is it just strictly?
So the implicit bias training that we do is Lieutenant Antonovich and I are our instructors. We do have discussions about implicit bias, and certainly there's, even with procedural justice, there's different theories and different programs out there. And I'm sure Dr. Warden can speak to this as well. The thing about implicit bias is it's important to recognize that everybody, it doesn't matter whether you're white, black, police officer, civilian, has very similar biases that are shaped by the media, by friends and family, by schools, by your education, by your experiences. There's different discussions that we do within this training, and there's different exercises that we do where you start to recognize how your brain categorizes things that may not, on face value, may not seem bad or negative, but the way your brain categorizes it may put it into a negative process. Certainly without putting that up on display, it's hard to, I guess, explain or visualize, but we had a class about a year ago now with a group from South Korea and a couple members from around the state, different training units. And we actually did an exercise where we started categorizing descriptive words. And what we found out when we did these exercises, one group categorized, when you think of Asian, what do you think of? One other group categorized, what are some stereotypes or biases that Black individuals may have? And then what were some stereotypes or some things that a white group may have? And when people put these together, everybody came up with it. When you put it out on paper, you could see that we all have these same stereotypes. It doesn't matter if you're trying to be positive or negative, they come to the surface unconsciously. So with implicit bias, it's about recognizing that those stereotypes do exist and creating that time and space to make better decisions based on facts rather than, a quick, sudden reaction.
Are there ways that the police force uses actual responses that people have had as a way for some collective learning? I know within our congregation, we do a lot of anti-bias training. And one of the things that we do is if there's been an interaction that's been bumpy, we sort of review it. How else could we have responded? How else could we have greeted this person at the door instead of the way that it happened? Does that happen as for the police force as well?
That's part of our continuous, whether it's the SQCRs or our supervisors evaluate calls, or whether it's complaints that come into professional standards, where we're evaluating those calls and not just looking at or investigating what occurred, but what could be done differently, what could be done better to improve this process. And that's a continuous conversation with the training unit as well.
Thanks.
Oh, so the SQCR is it's a standardized quality control report is what the acronym is. And it breaks down what the call is, who's involved with the call, how the officer handled it, was there investigation complete? That ties into procedural justice, whether people were given a voice, whether they were neutral in the decisions, respectful, trustworthy. So it's really fluid and continuing to learn and improve how we police.
So thank you, Lieutenant. Just to keep on the timeline, again, people have other questions, feel free to reach out. But I'm going to go to Sergeant Deering now for the 2-minute miracle working of de-escalation training and practice, so that look to wrap up on a soft point of 3 o'clock.
Okay, everyone can hear me? What we're going to talk about here just a little bit is the idea of de-escalation. I know everyone has obviously heard that term or word used quite a bit lately. To kind of understand it and understand it from a perspective that we look at, in May of 2019, the Department of Justice came up with a definition for de-escalation. It's kind of wordy, but I wanted to get everybody, at least to get it out there to everybody first. They define it as the strategic slowing down of an incident in a manner that allows officers more time, distance, space, and tactical flexibility during dynamic situations on the street. When you kind of take the sum and substance from that there, de-escalation really means the reduction of intensity of a conflict or potentially violent situation. De-escalation is something that this department has kind of worked into a lot of the trainings that we've done for the past several years. Recently, there's been a big to more scenario-based or reality-based type training in the police world. I'm actually happy to say that, myself and who had the training sergeant job position before me, who now Lieutenant Antonovich, took a real forefront stance on that. And we switched this department to really focus and incorporate that scenario-based and reality-based training, which allowed us the ability to work de-escalation into a lot of the trainings that we do on a yearly basis, whether it be firearms, defensive tactics, taser recertification, crisis intervention. Now, back in 2019, we did actually take an online class, every officer here, a 2-part online class titled De-Escalation and Communication. That kind of encompassed 2 different sections. The first part was addressing and kind of controlling or managing the individual's behavior that they were potentially dealing with. And then the second part of it was looking at how you could address, manage, or even control your own emotions and behaviors when put in those situations. So, we're able to, I know a couple different people have touched on it today, in the facts of, things are ever changing, or these living documents or breathing documents. And that's kind of how we operate with our training here at the department too, in regards to the de-escalation aspect. The classroom stuff is great, and it provides a great tool and a great starting point for us to move forward with it. But to be able to incorporate de-escalation into all the different trainings that we provide our officers on a yearly basis kind of, reinforces that ground rule of it. We did have, and I think hopefully we'll still be able to play it for you, a short video clip, and Lieutenant McLaughlin is going to kind of get that queued up for us here. One thing that we wanted to touch on is the idea of de-escalation through use of force. What we're going to show you is a short video clip here. Officers attempted to stop an individual who had multiple outstanding violent felony warrants, and a foot pursuit ensued. That individual ran from officers, and officers were able to kind of what we call put a perimeter on, or hold a perimeter, and ultimately a short time later located that individual inside an enclosed porch area of a residence. And we thought this was a good example of the first officer on scene, the commands he's giving to the individual, the way he's talking to him in that calm manner, calm demeanor. The individuals kind of barricaded themselves or hidden themselves buried in the corner here of this porch, and you'll see through other officers arriving on scene that yes, the first officer on scene has his duty weapon out. We don't know what this individual ran for other than the felony warrants. Did they have something? They're now hiding themselves in their hands in a position we can't see. We maintain that obviously distance and reactionary gap in time, but as other officers arrive on scene, the need for that level of force starts to decrease. Now a taser comes out, and now ultimately through commands and the show of that, this individual relinquishes and comes out with their hands behind their back and is placed in custody without any other issues whatsoever. So LT, if you can cue that up for us. I'm not sure if anyone else could hear the sound on it. We couldn't hear. But again, the idea that, the first officer on scene is there by themselves, they kind of maintain that communication line with the individual. The second officer on scene now switches to that taser aspect, starting to de-escalate in that force. And then ultimately, the individual that they're dealing with, seeing all of that stuff, becomes compliant. And then, the use of force kind of de-escalated that situation entirely. So again, I know it was kind of rushed and we covered a lot of things there. Just knowing that we work in the training unit, work hand in hand, as Lieutenant Kelly said, with professional standards to see those new trends, things that they're seeing in their investigations, and work together as to what we can develop training-wise. The shift to that scenario-based or reality-based training has been amazing. In my opinion, it allows those officers not only to work on those de-escalation skills, but those communication skills and whatever skill we're there for that day, whether it's that crowd control, that firearms, that taser, whatever it may be. So it's a more encompassing training rather than just kind of sitting and looking at a PowerPoint. So again, if anyone has any questions, please let me know.
Thank you. Chief Clifford, is Dr. McLean on to kind of go over where we are with the survey? Wrap that up.
Mayor, Sarah isn't on, but Dr. Warden's on. Dr. Warden, if you're prepared just to give a brief update.
I can try, Carissa. Sarah had an urgent situation. I know she's been on and off the call. I believe the plan is to send a link to the members of the steering committee, enabling them to preview the survey with the expectation that a different link, the real survey, will go out maybe tomorrow or the next day. I'm not quite sure what the timeline is, but you can all expect to get a link so that you can go through the survey and see the way it will look for respondents who can, of course, at some point include you. But the link you're going to get is just going to be a preview.
So thank you, Dr. Warden. And again, we brought in the Finn Institute as our research partners, so I'm deferring to them in terms of the formatting and some of the final word choice in this survey. When it goes out, people may have some questions about it, and it's the nature of working with a group. Things aren't going to be 100% perfect, but we're going to ask people to take the input, look at it, and then from your respective positions within the community, help us get that out to people so that they can actually take the survey and we can get that data back so that it can be processed. And again, Doctor, I thank you for your time and effort and the work that you've done on this whole project. And with that, Chief, do you want to say anything? And then just any quick questions or comments people have, and we'll get people back on schedule.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I'll be brief. Just going through the executive order. We have gone through everything that's in the executive order that the governor asked us to go through and discuss. What's left are a couple things that we just don't participate in. And I'll let everybody know what those are. It is law enforcement assisted diversion programs. I can say that we have looked into that. That is something that is resource sensitive to us. So we can talk about that more, but we would need funding for that. Restorative justice practices and community-based outreach and conflict resolution. Again, two other things that we as a police department don't do. I believe restorative justice practices may be something that's done at the county level, but we're going to need to have further discussions about those. We're just not going to be able to present on them. Everything else has been presented upon. If anybody has any questions about what we've gone through last week and this week, please send emails to the collaborative email address. We will get answers to any questions that anybody has. And I'm thinking that next week when we meet, we can then possibly answer some of those questions, share some of the questions, and have more time for a dialogue on all of these topics. That's all I have for it.
Any questions or comments?
Did you have a question?
Jamel? Still having sound issues. Still breaking up.
Well, maybe it might be good for you to send out an email to the group, because I think the points you're making are important.
Were you able to understand it, Genghis?
No. Vaguely, okay. I have no familiarity with what he's saying. That's why I think maybe an email to the group might.
He said that himself and the county are working on a lead program.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. I just wanted to acknowledge that last week, as we were meeting, that gathering and attacking the Capitol, and that the work that our police force does and the work of this task force is not a small thing. That a police officer lost his life last Wednesday. And that our officers, I just want to acknowledge, I know that you put your lives at risk every day. And I also know that there were police officers as part of those that were rioting. And those of you who offer training and those of you who are officers that support one another, how important that is, because your ability to be able to prevent harm or cause harm is really high. I am very grateful for the work of this task force and the commitment to be able to continue conversations. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gardner. Will?
Hello. Sorry, I jumped on a little bit late, so I didn't know kind of where you guys were in the agenda. But you know, I wanted to just really speak to the fact that I thought it was monumental that the governor mentioned some of the work that we were doing here in Schenectady as part of the State of the State address. And I really think it speaks to the collaborative and our connections and the work that we're attempting to do, and really being kind of the first in the nation to set forth a movement of that stature. So, you know, I really want to applaud the collaborative and the police chief and the mayor on the work that we're doing. And, you know, thank you guys.
And don't be modest. It was your initiative that gave us some of that guidance. So thank you. So I thank everybody. We ran a little bit over today. We'll see you next week. The survey's close to being done there. We'll get it out, and that becomes the next big engagement with the public so that we can validate some of the concerns and maybe, again, help fine-tune some of our final decisions. I want to thank everybody. Have a safe afternoon, and we'll see you next week.